Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked. Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you so much for being in class today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. And if you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Eric is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota, GCN. I'm Vincent Finelli. Telephone listen line is 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's been pretty hot, pretty dry. How about you?
Well, it's been unseasonably warm here this winter. Normally we would be getting frost every day at this time of year, and I think it must be about a month since we had a frosty morning, you know. So it's sort of, we're not getting baking heat.
Yeah.
But it's a lot warmer than what it has been, than what it should be at this time of year here. Yeah.
I just heard the news at the top of the hour, and here's what they've been reporting. Now, we've been reading this, of course. 110,000 acres destroyed in California in the Carr wildfire. Over 1,000 buildings and homes destroyed. And I talked to Dane Wigington a few days before the fires really got bad, and he's in that area of California. And he said it's pretty bad. I called him yesterday just to check on him to see if he's okay. And I'm concerned because this is the first time in years that I haven't been able to contact Dane Wigington. And he was hosting a conference on geoengineering and violent climate change in that area of California, Redding, California. And so it was scheduled to be at a large convention center, and that was taken away from him because of the wildfires. So then he rescheduled for a Holiday Inn, and that was good to go. And we called the day before to see if it was still on schedule, and it was on schedule. And no problem. And then that was taken away from him because they needed that space in that large conference room for the firemen to sleep. So it was pretty serious out his way, and I have not gotten a call back, and that's highly, highly unusual. So I'm concerned about his safety. Yeah, that's Dane Wigington we're talking about. So I don't know if anything has happened or not. I don't know. Maybe he's been forced to evacuate. Maybe he doesn't have a cell phone. I don't know. But for those of you who, if anyone does know, please give us a call, 866-582-9933. So it's pretty serious. And as I counted, there were 19 wildfires as of yesterday, or fires, I should say, that were destroying trees, anything that was growing and anything in its path, cars, even the wheels. You could see these puddles in the pictures of where the fire has gone through, where vehicles were, and the aluminum magnesium wheels melted into puddles. Now the steel wheels, you could see them. Yeah, you could see the steel wheels on the vehicles, but if there was, aluminum or an aluminum alloy or plastic, all gone. Even the glass melted. Pretty hot fire, pretty serious. And, that's a, people talk about terrorism. And I didn't want to say it. But now it's coming out that wildfires could be very, very terrifying and could be a form of terror. And we have to make sure that we don't allow that. And, even in our neck of the woods right here in Missouri, it is so dry. I mentioned that we have seen 25% of the normal yield that we would get if we cut grass for hay. And typically you could buy a round bale of hay for $30 to $35. And that would be 1,000 pounds, roughly, plus or minus 100 pounds or so. So a 5-foot by 4-foot bale, or a 4-foot by 5-foot bale, or a 6-foot by 4-foot bale, about 1,000 pounds would be $30 to $35. That would be last year, the year before. I'm now hearing that hay in our area has hit $100 a bale.
Oh,
so
my
that's
gosh.
Three times the price that it was last year. That's because farmers are in a panic. And I mentioned on this broadcast several times over the last probably couple of months that what I see happening, my future expectations, which I said months ago, was that the farmers would get to the point where they'd say, man, I was hoping for some rain, haven't had any rain, the grass isn't growing, the cows are getting thin, I guess we're going to have to sell our cows. And then on the same day, farmers would say, okay, we've got to sell our cows. And then there'd be a mad rush to sell their cows, all on the same day. Now, that's kind of an exaggeration, all on the same day, but I meant all around the same time. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. Cattle auctions in our neck of the woods usually start early in the morning, and so what the farmers will do is they'll bring their cows the day before. The cows will all be sorted, ready to be auctioned the following day, and then the auction starts in the morning, and then by 4 o'clock or so in the afternoon, the auction's over. Well, last auction that we know of, the auction went till 11:30 at night. So
oh, my gosh.
So there's a mad rush right now to sell cows. And if you hear any mooing in the background, I don't know if you can through the glass windows, but right outside we are gathering our cows, and they're going to market. Not all of them, but a couple trailer loads are going today. And it's a sad day here at the farm. We don't like to do this, but we can't feed them. We can't feed them. And let me give you an example. If we feed 4 round bales a day, 4,000 pounds of hay a day, it used to be $120 or so. Now we're talking $400 a day to feed the cows. $400 a day. It's not sustainable. We can't do it. There's no way that there's even close to a break-even point. So, and how much is that a month? $12,000. $12,000 a month to feed the cows grass. There's a scramble going on, and Missouri is known for claim jumping. Back when land was being given away by the President James Buchanan land grant, you'd stake your claim, and those claims would be honored the next day, all on the same day, and people would steal each other's claims. That's part of the history we have here in Missouri. So we've got, when people say, I'm from Missouri, they could have in their lineage claim jumpers. So look at who has the best land, Mm-hmm. Maybe they were claim jumpers in their family. What are your thoughts, Guineith?
Well, I'm just wondering if that's why Missouri is called the Show Me State, because nobody believes anything that anybody has to say. So they always are
including each other.
Proof.
Yeah, including they don't believe each other.
They don't believe
except for one thing they do. Yeah, except for one thing they do believe. They do believe that if you don't go to their church on that corner, you're going to hell.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah.
Well, it's actually true. It's true. Yeah, Mrs. Finelli and I decided to go to the local church in our little hamlet. And, it was a Baptist church. And Mrs. Finelli converted from a previous religion. It was a Christian religion to Roman Catholic because, well, that's what the Catholics require. You marry a Catholic, you're going to convert to Catholicism. So she did that. And the local Catholic church is, 120-mile round trip. So we thought, well, let's try our local church because, gee whiz, a lot of religions in Christianity are similar, close enough probably for us. And the preacher said, you got to be here. You got to be at our church, not the one down the corner or down the road, our church, because if you're not here, you are not getting a front row seat in heaven. This is the one. This is the right way to go. And Mrs. Finelli was so outraged at that, meaning, we've been going to the wrong churches all our lives, and, well, praise the Lord, we found this one, right? Because this is the one church that has the connection, the contract with the Creator that will get us a front row seat. She was so outraged, she said, that's it. We're out of here. We're not coming back. And we didn't. That was it. And I agreed with her. So that's, it's one thing that Missouri does. The other thing I mentioned is it's a place where there's plenty of lying and cheating and stealing and from each other. And it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant from that perspective. But from a wide open space perspective, it's great. It really is. And I don't want to move. I might, but I don't want to. I'm kind of happy here. And the thieves know that they need to keep their distance because we just might lose our tempers. I'm talking about the Finelli family. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and it's a sad day here at the farm. The cows are going to market. Not because we want them to, but because we can't feed them. So, Guineith, what would you like to talk about today?
Okay. I think that the best topic to discuss would actually be the weather and the reasons why it's so unusual. It's so hot out there, I sent you a email earlier of a news report that I found of a very, very unfortunate dog. And it was actually so hot, the weather was so hot that all the skin was actually burnt off the back of this dog. And it actually had third-degree burns all the way down its back. And it was, it was just a dog that had been left outside on a hot, sunny day. And it was it looked like a black or a brown dog. So it wasn't a light-coloured dog. Normally, if you get a light-coloured dog, it is possible to have a little bit of sunburn on the ears or on the nose. But this was all down its back, and it was just absolutely amazing and very, very sad. But that's the intensity of the sun that's out there at the moment. And I think that it is because we are at a solar minimum. But as well as that, I think that there are also, man-made influences. It's not the whole CO2 thing. That's a lot of rubbish. But there's this heart machine, and there's the chemtrails, and the thing about the chemtrails and how that would make the sun so much brighter, or seemingly so much brighter, is that it has aluminium dioxide as one of the main ingredients in the chemtrails. And what that does is it increases the reflectivity of the atmosphere, but when these people thought of this, I think they were thinking to reflect most of the sun's light out to space, but they didn't think that it could also reflect more of the sun's light actually down onto the surface of the Earth. Does that make sense to you, Vincent?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
There's another component to that, and I was pleased to hear you say this, because most people would say, "Yeah, it's not us. We're not doing it. It's from the sun." I don't believe that the sun is doing exclusively all of this heating. They say, "Well, we've gone through these cycles before." Well, in the northeast part of, well, not necessarily just the northeast, but the northeast part of the United States, let's say from Virginia north, most homes have heating systems that use oil. And most homes have either a 275-gallon oil tank or a 550-gallon oil tank. If the tanks are in the basement, they're typically 275 gallons. If they're outside, buried, or above ground, typically 550 gallons. And I know for a fact that most of these homes that have oil burners for heating systems burn about 550 gallons of oil per winter. And if you multiply 550 times all gallons times all of these homes, and that's just homes, okay? We're not talking about factories at this point, just homes. That fuel is designed to go directly from a liquid fuel it's like diesel oil. Actually, it is diesel oil, to heat. It goes directly from fuel to heat. Some of the heat goes up the chimney, some of it, stays in the house. But eventually it leaks out of the house, and that's why your oil burner comes on and again and again and again and again. It cycles, because the heat's lost. To where? Outside. So the heat's going outside. So how can we possibly say that we're not heating the planet? How can we say that? It's illogical. Because we know that the heat leaks out of the house. That's why we have to keep running our heating system. That's just one type of heat. We'll be right back. Guineith is with us live in Australia. So, Guineith, I did a little bit of research, and here's what I've learned. That in the United States, we, in 2016, these are the figures that I'm using, 2016, a couple of years ago, we consumed about just over 19 million barrels of fuel, crude oil, a day. 19.69 million barrels per day. So how many gallons are in each of these barrels? Well, in 1866, it was adopted as the standard barrel would be 42 gallons. So 19.69 million barrels of 42 gallons apiece is how much fuel we use per day. Okay. So what is crude oil used for? Well, there's liquefied gas, okay, gasoline, kerosene, diesel fuel, motor oil, and then, what's left, we build roads with it. That would be asphalt. And we form roads with that. We mix it with some stones and crushed stones and so forth, and then we have these black roads. So we try to use, the whole buffalo, right? We try to use all the oil. Well, most of that, the biggest percentage of the fuel goes to gasoline and kerosene and jet fuel and diesel, which goes to heat. Now, how efficient is a gasoline-powered car? Well, about 20% of the energy content in gasoline, when used in a gasoline-powered vehicle, goes to moving the vehicle. Okay? The rest of it goes to heat and friction losses, which is heat. So 20% is actually used. So 80% of the gasoline that we burn in our car goes to heat. And almost all of the fuel oil or diesel that is used in the oil burners goes to heat. And almost all the jet fuel that's used in these jetliners goes to heat. So you put all this together, it seems inconceivable to me that we are not increasing the temperature of our planet just by heating it up with the fuels that we use. And I've just talked about crude oil. Okay? We're heating the planet with coal too. And we're heating the planet with forest fires. And we're heating the planet with nuclear energy. I mean, why do they have those great big, what do they call them, cooling towers? Why do they have great big cooling towers on nuclear reactors? Why are they so big? Because they have to be so big. If they could make them the size of a thimble, they would. But they can't. Why do they put nuclear reactors in Japan? Why did they put them near the ocean? I guess they needed to use the ocean to cool the reactors. Why do they put nuclear reactors on large bodies of water? Because they need the water to cool the reactors. So when we cool the reactors and we dump the heat from the reactors into the water dumps the heat into the air as well. So we absolutely, positively, for sure, in my opinion, are heating the planet with the fuels that we use. Guineith, do you agree or disagree with that? Guineith, did I lose you? Hey, Guineith. You know, there's only one possibility that I can think of, class. And that, Guineith, you there?
I'm here.
I was just wondering if...
fall asleep.
Did you?
I'm very sorry. The thing is, okay, what you're talking about is the urban heat island effect, okay? And environmental scientists actually recognize that it is a factor. It's a really, really strong factor in climate systems internationally, okay? Because you're absolutely right. It's the air conditioners, it's the heating oil, it's the cars, it's the fact that urban environments tend to have so much concrete and so much bitumen all the way through them, okay? And all of these things, they tend to be heat sinks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and class, what is a heat sink? If you've ever looked inside a vintage stereo, and you know, behind that screen that keeps the large chunks from falling into the electronics, you'd see this massive aluminum heatsink. And the idea is that the output transistors of that stereo system get so hot that they would self-destruct if you couldn't move that heat to someplace else. So what they do is they use a thermal compound, and they have the transistors mechanically connected to a heatsink, which will radiate the heat outward as well. So that's why your amplifiers get warm. And that's why computers get warm. As a matter of fact, if you look at the central processing unit of an Intel-powered computer, the actual processor itself is probably about a 32nd of an inch by, well, let's say an eighth of an inch by an eighth of an inch. That's the actual processor size. But they put it in a big package, roughly an inch and a half by an inch and a half, because they need to have that heat radiated outward. Otherwise, that central processing unit will self-destruct. And, yeah, so that's what they do. So that package is designed to conduct the heat outward, and also to allow for mechanical connections that we need a little bit more space to have, you know, a couple hundred connectors onto a central processor. So the package has to be a little bit bigger. That's why if you've seen a central processing unit, they've got so many pins on them. So the pins transmit the heat to the socket, as well as the top of the integrated circuit package central processing unit has an area that will contact with a heatsink, and the heatsinks generally aren't big enough, so they have to have a fan cooling off the heatsink. So yeah, we're dumping a lot of heat into the environment. As a matter of fact, before I moved the studio, when I had the studio in another part of the farmhouse, I literally put the computers inside a cubby and I sealed off the air so that air could enter into this cubby where the computers were. And then I had a small fan, a 4-inch fan, that would pull the air out of the cubby and dump it into the garage. And the reason for that is I didn't want to dump the heat into the house and have to cool off all that heat that I dumped into the house. I didn't want to do that. So I dumped the heat outside, right? That's what makes sense to me. But that's what's happening. We've got all these computers running and generating a lot of heat. As a matter of fact, I measured how much power our computers draw in our farmhouse. Okay? Typically, any point in time, they draw about 370 watts or so when they're running.
Wow.
That's a lot of power. That's an enormous amount of power. It's about a third of what a toaster would take. And you know, you don't think of that. But, right now I've got 3 computers running in the studio, a mixer, and I have a headphone amplifier, and I've got some other electronics, monitors, and so forth. But there are other computers in this house as well. So the Finelli household's roughly 400 watts of computer power draw when we're running. So most of the day, that's what's happening. Now, I shut the computers off when I'm not using them, but there are other computers running doing other things at the farmhouse. So is that atypical? How many people have televisions running 24 hours a day? So all this energy that we think is, clean electric energy is generating heat at the power generation side, whether we're burning coal or nuclear or natural gas, and at the consumption side, where you're using it. So, Guineith, I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. No, that's true. Generally, the difference is between 3 and 5 degrees centigrade, okay, between an urban area and the surrounding countryside. And where a lot of the global warming hype came from many, many years ago was because they noticed there was this difference in the temperature and the temperature was increasing and increasing. But what they didn't take account of was that the weather stations were usually in an urban area, and that the urban areas were becoming increasingly built up. And it's, if you have a think about it, okay, if you have ever lived in obviously you live in a rural area, and I live in a rural area, and, we have these things called ant nests where we are, okay? Around where we are, they're generally bull ants, okay, which are probably, they're quite a big ant. They could be a half an inch to a 3/4 of an inch long, and they have really fierce-looking teeth. They are quite fierce. They build large nests. And did you know that the center of a bull ant nest is quite a bit warmer than the surrounding area? They don't have any computers. They don't have any cell phones. They don't have any radiation generating devices. They don't have any TV. What they have is they have their biology. And their biology generates heat. Mm-hmm. Your biology generates heat. And
very good point.
My biology. And even if we didn't have any of this extra stuff going on, we would still be putting heat into the environment where there's a bunch of us all together in one place.
Guineith Isaacs is with us, and we're talking about these extreme temperatures. Guineith, did you want to continue, or did you want me to make a comment?
Okay, you can make a comment if you like.
Okay, so I just looked at the typical temperature in Spain, and from what I've been able to determine, the hottest month is August in Spain, and the temperature is 74 degrees on average Fahrenheit, 24 degrees centigrade. And they are expecting in Spain and Portugal this week temperatures to reach 118 degrees Fahrenheit. 118.
Oh my gosh.
Now, I know that in lots of homes in Europe, they don't have air conditioning systems as almost everybody in the United States does. I don't think they have the electric grid that could support it. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I've come to learn. Do you think that's correct or not?
I don't think that they have air conditioners because, for one thing, they generally have house designs that are more passive in their heating and in their cooling, especially in the Mediterranean countries. They've been living there for a long time. You do tend to get very, very hot temperatures there, but not as hot as that. 118 Fahrenheit is just huge.
Yeah,
you know, and that's not the urban heat island effect, and it's not anything that would be. You know, I couldn't think of anything on this earthly level that would account for that. I think that is probably it could be the chemtrails. But I would say that it's probably some type of solar effect. And the thing is that the sun, there is actually tidal effects associated with the sun and with climate. And at the moment, most of the planets are actually gathered on the same side of the solar system relative to us as what the sun is. Okay, so that would influence the sun's the way that the solar atmosphere operates, and that would possibly cause it to have an increased heat level, and also the increased the solar minimum. There's fewer solar flares, and they tend to let the sun's, they tend to blow off a lot of solar energy. And because you haven't had many solar flares lately, that could be making the sun heat up more internally, which would be resulting in increased levels of solar radiation reaching us. There's any number of possible causes. It could be also, that the upper atmosphere has been damaged by human activities, sulfur and radiation, chemtrails once again, other types of radiation, HAARP radiation and such like, messing with the upper atmosphere that actually protects us from a lot of solar radiation. Does that make sense to you?
It certainly does. And what you're talking about, the urban environments are warmer than the countryside's absolutely true. And we have in our old Dodge truck, it's got a display that tells us what the temperature outside is. And when our son and I were pulling a trailer through 1,100 miles, we noticed that there's roughly a 10 or greater degree difference in the winter between the urban environments and outside the urban environments. Way warmer in the cities. And I think it has something to do with all those oil burners, the heating systems, the vehicles, and less green, more black pavement and more black rooftops. Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Guineith Isaacs is with us live in Australia, and we've been talking about the weather, and we've been talking about some temperatures, for example, in Spain, hitting 118 degrees. Now, if you think about that, class, Your body temperature is 98.6 degrees. How are you going to cool off at 118? And is it going to be cooler inside the house? Maybe not. It might be even hotter inside the house than it is outside. And I was reading a report this morning, and, for those sun lovers, it's going to be great. You can go to the beach and bake and get some of that ultraviolet A, B, and C and increase your chances of getting cancer and getting burned. Just like that dog that Guineith was talking about. Guineith?
Yeah. There's another factor that I believe is probably influencing the global climate at the moment, and that is actually the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii. And what that's doing, I believe that what you're seeing on the surface is only a small part of what's actually going on there. We discussed this probably a few months ago about how the volcanism is, about how the Kilauea volcano is actually the biggest mountain on Earth and is actually taller than Mount Everest, but that most of its mass is actually under the ocean. And, it's gotten to the point now where the crater is collapsing on a daily basis, where you've got a cycle of, you get about a 5.4, 5.3 magnitude earthquake, and then a section of the caldera caves in on itself. And, there used to be a lava lake in the summit of the crater, and that's long gone. And what you've got now is you've got fissures opened up on the side of the volcano, and the lava just pouring out in massive rivers. Now that's what you're seeing in the ocean, in the open atmosphere. But what you're not seeing is what's happening underneath the ocean. Okay, and with regards to the El Nino effect, one of the major indicators in the El Nino is the subsurface temperatures near the date line in the Pacific Ocean, which is around about where Hawaii actually is. It's approximately on the international date line. And it's fairly close to the equator. So you're basically getting huge amounts of heat pumped into the ocean at the moment from the Kilauea eruption, which I believe is causing a massive El Nino that's being massively underreported, certainly by the Bureau of Meteorology. They're still on El Nino watch. Okay, and I'm looking at this on the Bureau's page. I go there about once a month, and I read their El Nino report. And El Nino is not man-made. It's totally natural. It's something that has been influencing climate across the globe for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it is cyclic. Okay. But the fact that you've got this massive volcanic eruption where the USGS is saying that in 200 years of history of observing, of white people observing the Kilauea volcano has never ever done what it is doing at the moment. It is heating up the world's, the Pacific Ocean, and that is going to affect the climate over the world because of the El Nino effect. It's creating a massive El Nino, in my humble opinion, and I actually did train when I was at university with some top climate scientists, including Tim Flannery, who's a very famous climate scientist, and I had like 15 hours of lectures a week with him for about 2.5 years when I was in college. He was one of my main lecturers. Sometimes it was 10 or 12, sometimes it was 15 hours of lectures a week. But you've got to recognize this whole thing is a system. At the moment, it's a system which is under huge amounts of pressure from the 5G network. I think that it's not just one factor. It is the Kilauea volcano heating up the Pacific. It is the chemtrails. It's the 5G. It's the urban heat island effect. It's everything. It's factors that are man-made, and it's factors that are natural. But the whole climate is reaching some kind of a tipping point, and I don't think that it's going to go very well. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah, it certainly does. And when you talk about the urban heat island effect, what you're saying is there's this effect that seems to be isolated to the urban area, and just a little bit outside the urban area. And when we built our house, our farmhouse, this was a time when we could choose everything. We could choose the design of the house, because we built it from scratch. We could choose the thickness of the walls. We could choose the kind of windows, the amount of windows, the flooring, everything. Insulation, wiring, plumbing, everything, including the roof pitch and the roof color. And so I was very concerned about energy efficiency. I'm a very frugal guy, and I don't want to waste anything. Literally, I don't want to waste anything. So I contacted roof shingle manufacturers, and I said, so I can't seem to find a website, or I can't find on your website the chart that shows the heat absorption of the different colored shingles that you offer. You've got some, and they've got proprietary names for them, but you start with the darkest of the blacks, and then you get into blues and greens, and then some tans, and maybe some reds, and white. So which ones of, where's that chart? Because I can't find it. And they told me they don't have one. Now, I would really like to choose a roof color that would be better in the summer to reflect the heat away from the house, rather than have the roof absorb that heat, transmit the heat through the roof decking, through the closed cell foam insulation, through the fiberglass insulation, through the sheetrock, and into the house. But they told me they don't have that. And the reason is because they're afraid of being sued, because their lawyers say, well, if we don't get it exactly right, we could get sued. So the whole planet is suffering because of a bunch of lawyers who won't say, these are our best estimates of heat absorption. And if you start with a rank of 100, this color black absorbs the highest, the greatest amount of heat. This color white absorbs the least amount of heat. And here are the rankings of the blues, the greens, the reds, the tans, and so forth, the grays. But they don't have that. And so I looked for it again just a few minutes ago, and I didn't find it. I still think the lawyers have been in control, and so we still don't have that information. But I'm sure that there's some universities that might have done some studies about this. So the bottom line is, the darker the color, the more black, the greater the heat absorption. The more light, the more toward white, the less the heat absorption. And the island effect, the heat island effect that you're talking about, is city roofs. If you look at these row houses that are blocks and blocks and blocks of them, you'll find that most of them have a black roof rather than a white roof.
Black roofs, tar roofs.
That's exactly right.
The most common route on urban buildings. But the thing about the urban heat island effect is it generally doesn't affect the climate out into the countryside. And, as soon as and so that's what I'm saying, it can't account for 100% of what's going on here, because otherwise, you're looking at across vast swaths of Russia, for instance, most of which are really, not at all developed, but you're having massive failures of the wheat crop, of the oats crop, the barley crop, and the corn crop, the maize crop in Russia, okay? And because the temperatures are just so unseasonal, and Russia is a vast continent, and yes, it's got, quite a big population, but it's really, really, really spread out across a vast landscape, so vast that when the sun's rising on one side of Russia, it's setting on the other side of Russia. So that can't account for 100% of what's going on here. I think that it is the 5G, it is the chemtrails, it is the, it's the Kilauea volcano, it's the increased radiation from the sun, it's the whole lot altogether.
And it's the change in our atmosphere.
Synergistically.
Guineith Isaacs is with us. Now, class, this broadcast is repeated through our affiliates throughout the day and night. So right now at the farm in Missouri, it's 10:25 in the morning, 10:25. So I went outside during the last commercial break, and I took out the non-contact thermometer, and I aimed it at a black vehicle that's parked in our yard, okay? And I pointed the non-contact thermometer at the side that the sun was shining on. 159 degrees. I went up and I touched it, and I thought, how hot is this? So I touched it, and I couldn't keep my hand on it. So I ran in and got the non-contact thermometer, 159 degrees Fahrenheit. That's pretty hot. Water boils at 212. So, of course, I put down the windows and so forth. But, our farmhouse has a kind of a whitish gray mortar and whitish gray limestone rock. And it's 6 inches thick. And I have measured temperatures of 118 degrees of the rock on the side of the house, when the sun shines on it. I've measured temperatures way higher than that on the garage doors when the sun shines on the steel garage doors. Now, the garage doors aren't black. They're kind of a grayish tan color. So, they're not the color that absorbs the most heat. And I believe that I've seen temperatures, like 140s, 140 degrees. Yeah. And the roof, I know I've measured our roof temperatures at 158 degrees in the sun. So I think there really is, a component to this violent climate change, the warming of the planet based on the colors that we choose. And now I believe cities are saying, tell you what, knock it off with those black roofs. I don't know if they're offering incentives, rebates or something to just change the color to white. I don't know if they're doing that, but if you look at some of the commercial buildings, they understand that they have to pay for, the heat of these corporate structures, and they are going more and more toward white because they know
that's
that
understandable. White is about the most cooling color that you can have on a building. What I would like to talk about is the effects of these, extreme temperatures that you're seeing all over the world. Okay, like right here where we are, I mentioned that we should be getting frost just about every morning this time of year. We haven't had a frost in probably a month or two. we've had a certain amount of rain, but we haven't had anywhere near the amount of rain that we should have. And the grass here, even the really tall bits of grass, they're only about 3 or 4 inches tall. And we should be having grass about like 12 inches tall across most of the land now. And the wheat crops, I don't think a lot of farmers have even bothered to put in a wheat crop this year. The wheat crops that I'm seeing, they're only a few inches tall, and they should be about 12 inches tall by this time of year. And likewise, all the other crops as well, that none of them seem to be doing well. None of them seem to be thriving. And that's definitely related to the climate. It's definitely related to the fact that we haven't had anywhere near as much rain as we should have had by this time of year. But it's also, we tend to get most of our agricultural production here during the winter. And it's just so unseasonal, I don't think the plants know what to do. We're at the beginning of August, and the trees are starting to put out their buds already. The fig trees and the mulberry trees on my land, they're starting to put out their buds for their new leaves. And I'm going, and the grapes as well. That's quite early, actually.
Yeah, and our trees are losing their leaves. We'll be right back. Guineith, I went out and checked the solar system to determine how much energy we're generating. It's pretty bright and sunny. It's overcast, but the sun is shining. And we were generating about 4,000 watts 20 minutes ago. Now we're generating about 4,400, a little over 4,400 watts in a 20-minute difference. So it's early in the morning still, and we are generating more electricity. And what I have to do is, we're generating so much electricity that I have to put additional cooling fans on our charge controllers so they don't overheat and melt down. So I'm seeing a dramatic increase in solar energy here at the farm. And class, you may not have ever thought about this, and you wouldn't unless you have a solar system. But if you feel those solar panels are kind of a bluish color, at least ours are, and if you feel the side that faces the sun, they get pretty hot. If you feel the back side, they're pretty warm, not quite as hot as the front. And that's in the summer. Now, in the wintertime, when it's really cold outside, you would expect that those solar panels would be cold. They're still warm in the sun when they're generating electricity. And even the cold temperatures, like, 20 degrees outside, you can still feel the panels are warm. So there's a lot of heat loss in the things that we do. The electronics. I mean, you feel the back of the TV, it's warm. You feel your radio or stereo, it's warm. You feel your computer in the back, it's warm. That's all wasted energy. We haven't figured out how to waste less yet. That's where we are right now. So I just wanted to share those thoughts.
Okay. That is absolutely true. What you've got to also consider, okay, if you've got wheat crops and maize crops, oat crops and barley crops that are a third of their size of what they should be for the season, what you've got to consider is that you're probably looking at a massive global crop failure, because this is not just in the United States, it's not just in Australia, it's not just in Europe, it's everywhere on the planet. You're looking at massive crop failures, and what you've got to, think about is if you have a crop failure now, which is not just like an isolated local one, but more or less a global crop failure, what you're going to be looking at 3 or 6 months down the track is that there is, at the very least, what food is able to be produced is going to be a lot more expensive. Okay? It may be that in many areas that grains become unobtainable, and also fodder for livestock becomes rare or unobtainable. And in a lot of areas, they feed the livestock on maize, and they feed the livestock on barley, they feed the livestock on wheat, and they feed the livestock on oats as a supplement or as their as a significant component of their food. And I myself here, I have a horse, and I feed him as a supplement to his food. I feed him grain, and it helps for him to maintain a good weight and that sort of shine in his coat. But you've got to realize that it's going to become harder for farmers to raise livestock for slaughter, like sheep, goats, cattle, chickens, etc. Okay, if their main component is wheat, it's going to become increasingly difficult and expensive to feed them, which is the very problem that you're facing at the moment. And the main effects of the coming crop failures haven't even kicked in yet. And yet where you are, the hay is, as you mentioned, $120 for a large round bale, and that it's simply becoming unsustainable for you to keep them. Now, what we've got to think of is ways that we can do things differently. Okay? We can't do anything about what the sun's doing, the fact that it's in a solar minimum, and the fact that, the radiation is certainly a key component in what's happening in these weather systems, the crop failures and all the rest of it. Okay? But what we can do is we can help to look after ourselves at the moment. Okay? And that is making sure that you have food stored in your cupboards, okay, to last. I mean, ideally, sorry, I've still got a little bit of this flu. You should have enough food in your cupboard, at the very minimum, to last you a month or two, okay? That's at the very, very, very minimum. You should have a vegetable garden out the back, growing at least some vegetables for yourself. And, you should have at least a few chickens so that you have some eggs that because eggs are just a really, really nourishing food. And they're one of the few foods that we as humans can actually live on and eat very little else of. You've got to think about these things. You've got to be self-sufficient, or you've got to have a large supply of storable food, because from time to time these sorts of crop failures happen. And I was listening to a podcast on the internet, and it says it looks as if we are heading into a global famine of the likes that hasn't been seen since the 14th century, which is a long time ago. That they were saying on this podcast that this is what we're looking at the moment. So now, while there's still food in the supermarket shelves, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, is the thing. Oatmeal is an absolute, such a valuable staple. And for a bag of oatmeal, it costs something like $1.20 or $1.30 for a 1 kilogram bag of oatmeal. Okay? A 1 kilogram bag of oatmeal can feed 2 people for approximately 2 or 3 days. Okay? And so if you're talking about just a few cents a day, probably about 20 cents a day, to have one really, really good substantial meal that will actually sit in your belly and actually sustain you. If you have a bowl of oatmeal in the morning, and this is something that the Scots realized hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago, they would practically live on porridge, because you could have a bowl of oatmeal in the morning and actually not feel hungry until about 2 p.m. in the afternoon. And that's quite amazing. Another staple that is at the moment quite cheap is rice. 1 cup of rice weighs maybe 200 or 300 grams. Okay? 1 cup of rice, when cooked, becomes 3 cups of rice. That is enough food for one substantial meal for one person. And, so once again, you're talking about around about 30 cents for a cup of rice that will give you a substantial meal for a whole day for 3 people. And you add to that the greens and the other vegetables that you can grow in your garden. You add to that the eggs. Another staple that I would consider to be vital in the cupboard is milk powder. Okay? Now, I think I was mentioning Vincent to you a bit earlier, another time when we were on the phone, about the possibility of you actually having a house cow, and that would be something that would really help to add to your food situation in a collapse situation, to just pick out a nice docile mother cow and train her to be milked. And where you are, that would definitely be a possibility, but for most people, of course, it wouldn't be. But milk powder is so cheap, really. It is. Around here, it's for a 1 kilogram bag of milk powder that makes up about 7 liters of milk. It costs between $6 and $7. That's less than $1 a litre for milk. And once again, milk is such a nourishing staple food. You've got to have these sorts of staples in your cupboard, and not just to go out and for the next few days, just to have enough food to last in your cupboard for the next few days. You've got to have it so that if something happens and you can't get to the shop for a number of weeks, I would say ideally you should have 6 or 12 months of food. Of course that's not possible. A lot of the time it's not practical, but it's something that should be there as a goal.
No disagreement here. No disagreement here. We'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us, and if you'd like to get more information about her, you can go to USA Prepares, USAPREPARES.com, and click on the Instructors tab, and it'll take you to some links, and you'll find Guineith there. Click on that. It'll take you right to her web pages. And Guineith, I have a couple comments. You mentioned the famine of the 14th century. It was also known as the famine of 1315. Is that what you were talking about?
Yes, that's the one.
Okay. And it was pretty serious, class. And I have been reading similar information to what Guineith was talking about, that yes, it can happen again, and there are those that feel that it will happen again. And here's some indications. Here's some connecting of the dots. So I've been to Aldi recently. It's a food store. It's a discount food store, and they've got some really great products at the best prices around. And they used to have I'm talking maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half to 2 years ago, they used to have about 20 cases of pasta. I'm talking about spaghetti noodles of different kinds. At least 20 cases on the shelves at all times. I was there about a week ago and there were 2. Not that they were cleaned out, but the space that they've allocated to put the pasta on the shelves is now relegated to about 2 cases.
Oh my God.
Spaghetti sauce used to be about...
That's another staple.
Yep. That's why I'm mentioning this.
They have in their house at all times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree.
Type wheat noodles, pasta.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And to go with it, if you decide that you want spaghetti sauce in jars, which lasts way longer in cool storage, dark storage, than cans of the same kind of sauce, those jars, they used to have about 20 cases as well. And they had 6 cases.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm very serious about this. I was there. Now, Aldi stocks the shelves all the time. If you want to, while you're there, they're refilling the shelves. So there's a lot of turnover of the products at Aldi's. Aldi's used to never, ever have damaged boxes. If you saw a crushed box, one of the employees would take that box and go in the back room and you'd never see it again. That's not the case anymore. Now you're seeing crushed boxes, dented cans on the shelves. I think that's an indication either of one or 2 things, or maybe both. One, they want to increase profitability and decrease waste. Or 2, there's less inventory for them to purchase, and they've got to sell everything they can. Now, if you go to Walmart about a year and a half ago in our neck of the woods, widened the aisles. It used to be that if one cart was coming one way and another cart was meeting head on, there'd be hardly enough room for you to get around. They've widened the aisles. Widening the aisles means there's less shelf space. And the same thing happened. You used to have a lot of coffee. You could just get any kind of coffee you wanted almost at Walmart. And they had lots of it, and it was deep in the shelves. Now it's not deep in the shelves, and there are fewer choices. And the pasta, same thing. Lower quantity on the shelves. Fewer choices and lower cases, if cases at all, at Walmart. So what I'm saying is I've seen it at Aldi and I've seen it at Walmart, and it's happening simultaneously. Fewer choices and less inventory. Now, what have they done with the floor space? Well, Aldi has decided to get into the dollar store kind of business, where they're selling trinkets and, barbecue utensils and floor mats and, pots and pans and some cheap tools. That's not why I go to Aldi. I go to Aldi for food. But I have a feeling that they've gotten into these cheap Chinese utensils and trinkets because they don't have enough inventory in food to fill their store. That's my guess. I can't prove it. That's just my thought. Are you seeing something similar in Australia?
Yes, we are. Yeah. When I tend to buy pasta, I tend to buy, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 bags at a time. And sometimes I find that I'm actually clearing out their stock that they have on shelf, available for everyone. And I, usually try and leave 1 or 2 bags there, but, oh well, there we go. But I had a flu the last few weeks and couldn't get into the supermarket for 2 or 3 weeks.
Hey, we're out of time, Guineith.